Story 1. When you prioritize your partner and love them unconditionally, you may eventually realize, after years of neglect, that you are not even a consideration in their life, especially when they make significant life decisions. At that point, you reclaim your self-respect and choose to walk away. Story 2. Yes, because I needed to love myself more. Loving someone who does not have the ability to love in return is truly heartbreaking. Story 3. In the end, she did more for strangers to gain their validation than for me, the only person who supported her financially and emotionally. Story 4. I loved the idea of him. The hardest part was losing the fantasy I built around him, the idea of being together. But I was in love with the man I first met. The easiest part was breaking up, freeing myself from fear and insecurity. It was hard to remember that the person I was breaking up with was not the one I fell in love with. In the end, I had to do what was right for me. Surrounding myself with family helped the most. I realized I was mourning a relationship with someone who never actually existed. It was all a facade to hide his true self. Story 5. Yes, sometimes love isn't enough when trust, respect, or shared dreams start slipping away. It hurt deeply, but staying would have hurt even worse. Story 6. Yes, we were together for 11 years. We were both addicts. I got clean, but he just couldn't. He went to prison, got out, cheated on me, and started physically and emotionally abusing me. I don't know why, but a small part of me still loves him. Story 7. Yes, sometimes you leave because you have to choose yourself, even though it shatters your heart. Sometimes you leave because you deserve better, and loving them also means loving yourself enough to walk away. And sometimes you leave because staying would only continue to hurt both of you slowly. Story 8. Because they didn't love me back or certainly weren't as emotionally attached and invested as I was. There has to be a balance when it comes to emotional commitment at a certain stage of the relationship, and if it's not there by then, it never will be. Story 9. Yes, we are moving to different parts of the country. Both of us were clear that a long-distance relationship was not going to work. Story 10. Every person I have ever broken up with and was serious about, I still loved. Just because you broke up with someone doesn't mean the love is gone. You just know it's not going to work out for a specific reason. Story 11. She was amazing and deserved better than me. It was mutual. She now has a beautiful family, and I am so happy for her. We are still very good friends. Story 12. I am on the verge of breaking up with someone I love deeply. He supports me financially, but I have to beg for his affection. Later, I found out that he doesn't understand the need for touch in a relationship, and I am just dumbfounded. Story 13. Yes, he was very controlling. I left my Muslim family because they were controlling as well. If I left them, why would I stay with someone who is also controlling? Story 14. I divorced her. It didn't matter how much I loved her, which is the most I've ever loved anyone or anything before or since her. But when someone refuses to treat their bipolar disorder or lupus, I couldn't deal with the manic episodes. If she had taken it seriously at any point, I would probably still be married. Instead, she brought in a church group to cleanse the house of spirits. I am an atheist, and magical thinking scares me. Story 15. Absolutely, they were my first physical partner. Sometimes I miss them. However, I know they dislike me and will never be the same person I wanted to be with again. Story 16. I am still angry with her for how she treated me. While I know it wasn't with malice, I cannot be with someone whose trauma isn't being addressed and who allows themselves to treat the ones closest to them as a stepping stool or a lapdog. I will always love her, but I refuse to be looked down upon by someone I have always treated as equal or even better. That is part of the problem. You can love someone and put them on a pedestal, but if they aren't doing the same for you, eventually you will resent either them or yourself for it. Story 17. Yes, I have experienced it multiple times, and I am grateful for that. I have been married for 10 years now. I cannot emphasize enough to anyone who has not yet experienced it. Love is not enough. Find someone you love who is also reliable and trustworthy. Someone you know will support you when you face challenges, just as you will do for them. Then make decisions with them in mind. Story 18. Yes, I have I had to because I could see that her goals for life were very different from mine. I was willing to help her with hers, but when it came to mine, she was not willing to help me. I could not see it working in the long run, so we had to go our separate ways. We are still friends, though. Story 19. Yes, I just did a few months ago. He was the love of my life and the best person I have ever known. It was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. He treated me better than anyone before him. We were together for 7 years and got engaged about a year ago. He brought up marriage sooner, but I wasn't ready. He was a good man and 12 years younger than me. I am about to turn 50 this year, and he is about to turn 38. I am starting to have health problems and was recently diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Prior to that, we were very active. He is still very active, and I didn't want to hold him back in life. I have lived my late 30s and my 40s. He hasn't. There is a lot of life to be lived in those years. He said I wasn't holding him back and that he wanted us to be together, but my heart told me it was best for him. He still tries to call occasionally to see how I am and sends me pictures of him and his dog out hiking. I am heartbroken, but it is what is best. Story 20. After all the love, effort, and affection I gave him, he couldn't figure out how to care for me in return. We both still love each other, and it is difficult. Story 21. I am nearing that decision now. She is wonderful in many ways, and I still love her very much. However, years of small issues are accumulating, leading to feelings of resentment and bitterness. Even when I try to discuss things calmly and constructively, we end up fighting. We hardly communicate anymore, and she feels more like a roommate. We still attend events together to maintain appearances, but she is threatening to move out at the end of the month. I have reached the point where I am no longer willing to fight it. Story 22. We had different ideas about what would happen if we got married. She did not want to be monogamous while I did, and I could not handle that. Story 23. Yes, because he was never there for me. He provided no support and seemed to resent me for some reason, despite everything I did for him. Still bothers me. I ultimately had to look out for myself and end it. Story 24. We broke up to pursue our careers. Silly, young, and ambitious. More than 10 years later, we are back together for what we call the remix. I still love everyone I have ever loved. That doesn't mean they belong in my life, though. Story 25. Yes, because he truly needed to grow up. I was tired of being the only adult in the relationship. Story 26. I love them, but our personalities are quite different. I cannot change him, and even if I change for him, he will not change for me. Story 27. I am afraid that he cheated on me. I moved out, but we remained friends until his death 3 years ago. I married, but my husband died nearly 2 years ago, after 37 years of marriage. Story 28. The hardest breakup I experienced was with someone I still loved. We had only been together a few months, but we genuinely cared for each other and got along well. Unfortunately, her poor decision-making often led to problems, prompting me to reflect on whether I wanted to endure this for the rest of my life. All my friends warned me that she was a red flag, and I ultimately decided to take their advice. Story 29. I am still legally married to him. However, he was with someone at work for years and even lived with her and her children in an investment apartment while I was finishing raising ours. Once I figured it out and our children were mostly raised, I decided I was done with this situation. He was tearing me apart inside. I did love him, but I went a little crazy. I was also struggling with mental health issues before being manipulated. He cannot afford to divorce me at this point in our lives. We are in our 60s, and he has so many equity investments that he would have to liquidate half of them if we split legally. We live in a state that does not recognize common law marriage, and there is no legal separation. We had no prenuptial agreement, and our marriage has lasted over 40 years. He knows he is cornered. Currently, he pays all the bills. The house and property are now worth $2 million and are 90% paid off. This property is mine. He has about 6 other properties in his name, and possibly his girlfriend's, but I really do not know. He does not believe in vaccines and engages in risky activities like swimming with sharks and flying rented small planes, so I think there's a good chance he will die before I do. I loved him deeply for decades, but now I do not think about him too much anymore. Story 30. We loved each other, but both had traits that hurt the other. I struggled to communicate my feelings, and she sought space, which I misinterpreted as indifference. It was a complicated decision. We spent a long time together talking, crying, and holding each other before ultimately deciding to part ways. We reached out from time to time but never met again. 2 years later, she is happy with another man, while I spend my time traveling and engaging in sports. Story 31. I was 20 and my parents forced us apart. They took my phone, blocked him, and deleted his number. They told me I'd better never see him again or they would kick me out and ensure I never saw any of my siblings again. I wasn't allowed to tell him they were the reason, or they would still kick me out. I couldn't risk homelessness, so I had to tell him in person a false reason for our breakup and why he was blocked. I was heartbroken because I still loved him, and now he hates me. He won't even look at me when I see him in public. They tried to do the same to another boyfriend 2 years later. I left while everyone was asleep. Story 32. We both loved each other, but we were so incompatible that the relationship was difficult for both of us. It caused more harm to my mental health than good, and probably affected her similarly, although I can't speak for her completely. Overall, I still have no issue with her. Sometimes things just happen. Story 33. She was controlling every aspect of my life. I couldn't have female friends. She had to be by my side every second of the day, and I was honestly sick of how obsessed she was with me. I couldn't even watch movies that featured attractive women. There were many things I had to give up because she was jealous and territorial. She wouldn't even let me engage in private activities, even when she wasn't in the mood for intimacy. Then everything changed. She started creating dramatic scenes in public and pretending to be a victim for attention. I realized I was worth more, so I ended the relationship. She immediately sought out other partners. Story 34. Yes, I waited a long time for him to leave his family. He was very attached to them, and considering the poor job opportunities in his country and my inability to communicate in the language, I thought it would be better for both of us to break up. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. He tried to reconcile for a long time, making it even harder for me. Despite my deep feelings for him, I still believe I made the right choice. He was the kindest person I have ever met. Story 35. Yes, we broke up because she was not open about her sexuality, and I was. This meant I could never meet her friends or family, show affection in public, or spend too much time together. She would set a timer on her phone when we hung out to limit our time together. I wasn't allowed to attend birthday parties, dinner parties, or any part of her life like that. It broke my heart to end it with her. Story 36. Yes, because addiction is challenging, and I cannot save someone who will not take responsibility for their own well-being. Story 37. Because our values shifted too much. I will always love him for certain things, but I am not in love with him, and he is no longer my best friend. Story 38. I accepted they would never love me like I loved them. I was hurting myself by staying. They were always honest and good, yet people couldn't understand why I ended it. It was the right decision, but it still hurts. Story 39. More than once, when you see where things are headed, it is sometimes better to call it quits while you are still civil. Story 40. In fact, he broke up with me. I prioritized him in everything. In my mind, he also prioritized and loved me as he claimed, but one day he simply decided to end the relationship and told me it was because he saw some of his attitudes reflected in me. Story 41. He didn't have or make time for me. We talked about it, and he was always reassuring me that after a certain event or another, we would have time. It never happened. As much as I loved him, I left. I felt terrible for some time after. Story 42. My last relationship ended because, despite loving him, his chronic depression was too much to bear. My needs were not being met, even after much communication. It has been slightly over a year, and I am still struggling with it, but I had to do what was best for me. I need a partner who makes me feel loved regardless of their mental state. I still wish him the best, and if he reaches out in the future, I would likely respond. Story 43. There were some warning signs I didn't like that began to happen over the course of a couple of months. He was frequently getting very drunk, was caught recklessly driving and received a speeding ticket, told me he hated himself and purchased a gun. The combination of all these things made me scared that something bad was going to happen. He was really sweet, but I got a bad feeling about these behaviors and needed to prioritize my safety first. Story 44. Ultimately, loving someone, being in love with someone, and being a good fit for each other are three different scenarios. You should only be with someone if they embody all three. Story 45. I think what did it for me was finding out that she has been sleeping with multiple people throughout our 5-year relationship. 2 different affairs and a one-night stand. Yes, I blocked and deleted her. It hurts so much. Story 46. Yes, alcoholism. After almost 2 years of being repeatedly lied to and hoping that each attempt at sobriety would be the one, I finally had to walk away. It was one of the hardest decisions I have ever had to make. Alcoholism is a disease, and seeing someone you love battle it is so difficult. However, it does not absolve a person of all responsibility for their actions and the pain they have caused their loved ones. I had to put myself first and do what I knew would be best for me, even though it broke my heart. I still care for him and hope that he can win his battle someday. Story 47. A lot of abuse occurred within my relationship. I tried to forgive and move forward over the course of a couple of years, but no real change was ever made. There was always a reason it happened again. I certainly wasn't perfect and made many mistakes, but I never once laid my hands on him in anger or said hurtful things to him on purpose. I loved him more than that. Unfortunately, he didn't feel the same. Again, there was always an excuse for why he acted out in anger towards me. Now it's time for me to heal properly, and I couldn't do that while still being so intertwined with him. I truly love him, and not being in his life is painful, but I needed to love myself more. On a positive note, I think it's working. I have surrounded myself with love from my friends and family, and they remind me each day that I'm worth so much and deserve the best. My self-confidence is starting to grow, and I am learning to love every part of who I am. Time has truly been my best friend. Story 48. She got into Stanford, and I never even applied to a school. There was no way I was going to hold her back. I bought her a laptop and said goodbye at the airport. No regrets. Story 49. Yes, but it wasn't a breakup. I had to move to another state for work after graduate school. We kept in touch at the beginning, and I made a trip to visit him. However, we both got busy, and time changed everything. Eventually, we drifted apart. Story 50. I wasn't worthy of that person. I think about her often and wonder how her life turned out. I want to tell her how sorry I am for having been a terrible person 50 years ago. Story 51. We had what I thought was a perfect relationship. Eventually, I realized it was because we stopped having any difficult conversations. When we disagreed, we just internalized our feelings. When I talked to him about it, he would agree, and then nothing changed. This situation was amplified by him working a swing shift job that barely gave us time to be together. But the lack of communication was the main issue. We spent 8 years where we never disagreed. Story 52. I ended my relationship with a woman after being together for just over 3 years because she stopped wanting to be intimate with me and refused to discuss it or work on it. I raised the issue with her, but 3 months later, nothing had changed. It broke my heart, but I felt it was necessary to move on. A few weeks after the breakup, she expressed a desire to try again and assured me she would work on our intimacy. I agreed to give it another chance, and we reunited for 2 more months. Initially, she made an effort, and our physical connection returned to what it had been at the beginning. I asked her what she wanted or needed, and aside from a couple of different positions, she did not request anything else. However, after 2 months, she started avoiding intimate moments and refused to communicate. I realized I had to walk away. Story 53. After we got engaged and I moved in with him 3 months before our wedding, I discovered his severe pornography addiction. Once that was revealed, everything changed. He attempted to seek help, but it was unsuccessful. He told me, "The pornography was there before I met you, and it will be there after you're gone." He tried to normalize the issue, but it was not normal, and our situation deteriorated. I had to leave and distance myself from that environment. Story 54. Yes, I love her, and our chemistry is aligned. Small moments are precious, and we have a lot of fun throughout the days and nights. She is gorgeous and loves me. The issue is everything surrounding our love. There is a lot of chaos, volatility, and dysfunction for a number of reasons. I could live day to day forever with her, but the struggle to make it emotionally sustainable and safe long-term is not happening, and it's heartbreaking. Story 55. Because he sent me 2 screenshots of his work achievements, and in the top left corner of the second screenshot was the Tinder icon in his notification/status bar. We were also having a conversation, as he mentioned right before sending the screenshots that he was going to get a second phone so he could message me from one while working using the other. I told him that having 2 phones with only me as a contact on a new WhatsApp with a new phone number seemed suspicious. He claimed he had nothing to hide and said, "Look, this is what I do on the phone," and proceeded to take and send 2 screenshots of his work, one taken seconds after the first. The first had no Tinder notification, just that his phone was on silent, which is likely why he didn't hear the notification come in as he clicked and sent the second screenshot that had the Tinder notification. I don't know what's worse. The fact he was lying and may have been throughout the entire year we were together, or that the man is clearly questionable. Story 56. Because he said he wanted to be with other girls. I couldn't just fall out of love instantly. Took many months to move on. Story 57. There wasn't any drama or a big story. We were 20, breaking up after 4 years together. We realized that we wanted to build different lives. I've never had any negative thoughts or feelings towards her. The way I think about it is that we were each exactly what the other needed during that chapter of life. Story 58. I don't love him anymore. I'm in a relationship with someone else who makes me very happy and wouldn't trade it for the world. However, when my last relationship ended, if I can even call it that, I was still very much in love for a long time. To give you the gist of it, he broke up with me first because he believed I was cheating on him, which I wasn't. The reason he felt that way was because his friend, who is also my best friend's boyfriend, shared a secret about his health with me that he hadn't shared with anyone else. My ex found this suspicious and assumed I was cheating. In reality, he had fallen for another girl who happened to be my best friend's sister, the same best friend he accused me of cheating on him with. He fell for her while we were still together. Fast forward a couple of days. Things didn't go well between them, and he came back to me after a lot of drama. He told me he was willing to stay with me if I cut all ties with the guy he thought I was cheating with, but I turned down the offer. Since then, both my best friends have broken up with each other, and they're still my best friends. All 3 of us are dating different people. There was never any switching sides, so I don't have to explain why I chose to stay out of that relationship when I was given the opportunity to have it back. Story 59. We broke up after 5 years of a bad relationship. There was no fixing it. I thought I loved him, but I realized after a while that he never loved me, and I never loved him. So it was easy to let go of my ex. I am glad he is my ex. I have a new partner who is amazing, and I know our love is real. I am much happier now. Story 60. Yes, she was absolutely perfect. She bought me roses, paid for my meals no matter how much I offered to pay, constantly checked up on me, and was with me during my cancer diagnosis. She was just a genuinely nice person. However, there were signs that she was controlling. She didn't like it when I hung up on FaceTime first, saying it bothered her, so she had to be the one to hang up. She also had a very high sex drive, which many men might appreciate, but I was waiting until marriage for religious reasons. She constantly pushed that boundary and disregarded my preferences, showing that she wasn't willing to listen to me. She also gaslighted me, saying the nastiest things, and when I addressed them later, she would deny it, asking, "When and where specifically did I say that?" There were many signs that indicated she could become a nightmare down the road, despite her many positive qualities. The real kicker was that she constantly mentioned her ex, even calling me by his name a few times. Story 61. Because his children were entitled brats, especially his son, and the father indulged this behavior. As a parent, I understand the difference between entitlement and respect. Story 62. It still hurts. I was putting in too much effort and getting little in return due to his mental health. We weren't compatible in the long run. We loved many of the same things and enjoyed each other's company, but I often felt dismissed. Sometimes he wanted me around, but not to actually hang out with me. I would be at his house while he slept in or spent hours decompressing in his room while I just twiddled my thumbs. I also spent my 21st birthday alone, even though I was technically with him. I bought my own first drink and had lunch alone. To this day, I still love him, but I don't regret leaving. Story 63. I fought for the relationship while they continued to sabotage it and acted unaware. It was manipulative behavior. I had to leave for the sake of our child and my mental and emotional health. Story 64. He was arrested for domestic violence. I love him so much. It hurts. But no one will ever put that kind of fear in me again. Story 65. I'm currently in the process of breaking up with my fiancée. She seeks fulfillment from others, and I refuse to be taken for granted. Story 66. Yes, because they decided they weren't going to work, weren't going to cook, wouldn't apply for food assistance or go to the food bank. They wouldn't do anything in the relationship or household. And when I told them I was draining my savings account trying to keep the bills paid on my own and needed them to get a job, they told me if I couldn't afford the bills, then I should go back to school to get a new job. So I let the rental go, broke up with them, moved back home, and am currently halfway through an associate's degree. They were a great influence in all the wrong ways. Just so you know, they were not disabled. They just decided they wanted to smoke cannabis all day and be taken care of. Story 67. I still love my ex even after almost 10 years. I had to break it off because we were both broken. We would do anything for each other, and it was a roller coaster of ups and downs. I felt I was ruining her beautiful soul, and I needed to deal with my newly diagnosed bipolar disorder. I needed to be able to handle it on my own so I wouldn't drag people down anymore. I've tried dating since, but she set the bar so high that I haven't really given it a shot and I'm still single. Story 68. God was kind enough to bless me with two wonderful partners. I have borderline personality disorder, and I didn't come to terms with it until I had already broken my second partner's heart. If you truly love someone, you have to let them go and genuinely wish for their happiness. Fortunately, they were able to find healthy long-term relationships afterwards. One is married with 2 children, while the other is effectively a stepmother to her new partner and his 2 children. They have been together for a while now. Story 69. They were really mature, kind, and good-looking. Honestly, he was a gentleman. He was ready to settle down and start a family. I want the same, but not at the moment. I had told him that from the beginning because he had made his intentions clear. I just feel it's too soon. I have barely known him for months. I lost my job, and my mom got sick, so I had to go home to take care of her, and things just fell apart. I think he just got tired and he began being avoidant. I cannot accept reality quickly. I just remain silent. The truth is I loved him, and what we had was beautiful, but it is not constant. It hurts. Story 70. We became quite toxic for each other after 4 years, and it wasn't getting better no matter how hard we tried. I decided to end it before either of us got more hurt. Story 71. Yes, I don't doubt that he loved me either. He just didn't love me enough. He was a musician and loved the lifestyle and its perks too much. Story 72. I haven't broken up yet, but it feels imminent. She admitted to lying, cheating, and gaslighting me. She claims she wants to reconnect, but she is not being transparent enough and isn't putting in enough effort to repair our relationship. I don't know how I will ever be able to trust her again. I don't understand how this has become my responsibility, where I have to handle our interactions so carefully to avoid pushing her away. So yes, I haven't broken up yet, but if I do, it will be because I cannot keep wondering if I can believe what she says about anything. Story 73. I struggled with my feelings due to overthinking issues I needed to discuss with her. I became distant and broke up with her because I couldn't address the problem, which created a new problem that I avoided by breaking up. Lesson learned: always communicate. Story 74. She stole my mother's credit card and lied to me too many times. Our relationship was getting serious, and then she went crazy. I had to leave. Story 75. Because I was losing myself for him. He also could not be honest about his relationship with the mother of his child. Story 76. Yes, the distance was complicating our relationship, and we agreed to part on amicable terms instead of continuing until one of us did or said something unforgivable. Story 77. Yes, because our lives were not compatible. He has a daughter and I do not have children. It was a tough lesson to learn, but I was making myself miserable in an attempt to make him happy. Story 78. She and her son were going to move across the country to start a life with me. We were a little unstable, and I didn't want to take the chance of ruining her life. This was in 2016, and I still miss her to this day. She was definitely the one who got away. I don't doubt my decision, but I will carry that with me until I die. Story 79. I broke up with someone I loved deeply because I realized that I was the only one in the relationship. It felt like sitting in a room with someone I loved, who did not care for me. We were two people in one relationship focused on one person. They were using me for my love, time, and empathy like a placeholder. After the breakup, they confessed that everything I had ever believed was true. The part that hurt the most was not that I knew and still chose to love them, but that they knew I knew and still chose to stay. Story 80. I couldn't handle being treated as poorly as he treated me anymore. He never respected boundaries and his loyalty was questionable, but I still loved him when I ended the relationship. I did it for my mental health. Story 81. It's a long story, but I've been with her for 5 years. I caught her cheating, and after working through it, we got back together. She cheated again, so I ended the relationship for good. Sounds silly, but I still miss her. I've never connected with anyone else like I did with her, and I genuinely wanted to marry her. Oddly enough, she always called me her soulmate. Despite those feelings, I won't take her back again. I can't believe anything she says or trust her actions. She ruined that. I found out from her ex-best friend and some of her own drunken ramblings that she has cheated on almost every boyfriend she's ever had. Story 82. Ultimately, we could not agree on having children, and there was no way to reach a compromise on that. We still loved each other and have stayed good friends. He was even the best man at my wedding. Story 83. I joined the Navy, and after a year, I headed to university. I figured the long-distance relationship wouldn't work out, so I ended things, which was awful. She was very upset, and later, when I was alone, I sobbed like a baby. Years later, I reached out and apologized, and she was very cool about it. We are still on good terms, and I'm glad about that. Story 84. He lied frequently. I discovered his marriage license application online while we were dating. He referred to her as his sister, but she was actually his ex-wife's sister. He was living with his sister at the time. She was a widow for less than a year. He claimed he rescued her from living in poor conditions. Story 85. Yes, I still love my husband, but I had to walk away from my marriage because I realized I was more like his mother and therapist than his partner. I felt alone in the real world, dealing with most issues by myself because he was incapable. Story 86. Yes, I still love him even to this day. However, he had unresolved traumas that impacted our relationship and, in turn, affected me. Some people say that if you truly love someone, you can work through anything together, but in reality, that is not always healthy or possible. We tried. I really tried, but sometimes love just isn't enough to heal everything. Story 87. For the first time after years of marriage, she was truly honest. She said part of the reason she stayed with me was because of my money. She knew that another affair would end the marriage if there were actual consequences, but she didn't think there would be. She could never look at me and promise not to have more affairs in the future. She suggested that the best thing for our newborn would be for me to have custody. My heart broke in a way that will never fully heal, but life goes on. Story 88. I love that girl deeply, but her addictions, even if some people would call them light, got in the way of our happiness. The priority slowly shifted from me to her struggles, and I saw the vitality leaving her eyes. I tried to help, but you can't assist someone who doesn't want to be helped. The positive outcome is that our breakup led her to change her habits. She became comfortable with the way I cared for her. Nowadays, we talk very rarely, but every time I see her, my heart skips a little beat. Story 89. I broke up with someone I loved once. I became pregnant unexpectedly, and he said that if I didn't have an abortion, we would break up. I chose not to have the abortion, and we broke up. It really broke my heart. 14 years later, he is married with 2 young children, and I still love him. I never told him either. Story 90. Yes, and to be honest, these breakups are the most difficult. The reality is that you have to put yourself first. The reason I ended the relationship was that we had grown apart. We met when I was 16 and I grew up. I was at a place in life where I wanted to go out, have fun, meet people, travel, and live a little, while they were mostly focused on being an adult, working all the time, and not making time for me. When we hung out, it wasn't fun or romantic. It was just sex and a movie. I felt taken for granted and sad because I knew it was over. I needed to feel alive, and we were not on the same wavelength, so I broke up and we stopped talking. Despite everything, I loved them so much. I cared and even begged them to get back together later. Thankfully, they said no. I was genuinely scared to be alone since I had been dependent on them for so long. My point is, if you have that unsettling feeling inside that you've grown apart or aren't meant for each other, then listen to your instincts. It's time to go. Story 91. Unfortunately, yes, I felt there wasn't any space for me in the relationship and in his life. We barely saw each other despite efforts made and constant cancellations. Felt disappointing. I realized he didn't have the capacity to be present, and it felt lonely being in a relationship with someone who couldn't show up. Story 92. My college girlfriend was not the issue. Her family was, and the idea of joining my family with hers was not an option. I wished her nothing but the best, and I still do to this day. I now realize that my decision was for the best. Story 93. We were growing apart and going in different directions in life. I had a conversation with my mother towards the end when I was feeling lost, and she told me, sometimes you have to accept that loving someone isn't enough. Story 94. She wanted to get serious, and I wasn't ready. I didn't want to waste her time waiting for something that might never happen. Story 95. Yes, I had to move away, and she was supposed to join me after a year of long distance. 1 year turned into 2, then into an indefinite amount of time. I couldn't do it anymore, so I had to say goodbye. Story 96. Yes, our mental health issues did not work well together. We constantly fought. I would describe it as feeling like we were caught in barbed wire, and anytime either of us tried to move, it would just dig into both of us. The only solution was to separate and find healing individually. Story 97. He told me that I did something that concerned him, which made me decide it was better to say goodbye. I still think about him every day. Story 98. I was 21 and leaving for university. I knew I still wanted to have fun and didn't want to cheat on her. She was staying in our hometown. Story 99. I was very young, and it was my first intimate relationship, which was fine until I realized that the only thing we were doing was being intimate. When I tried to say, hey, I don't want to do this today, it feels like that's all we ever do. He agreed but was huffy and annoyed, and still kind of tried to initiate it anyway. I eventually gave in because I felt bad. I realized I was simply not mature enough to set and hold that boundary, and he was not mature enough to respect it. The dynamic had turned toxic, along with some other issues we had. I loved him, but love does not magically make me able to stand up for myself or provide us with the language to communicate about intimate relationships in mature and respectful ways. I knew I couldn't hold the line with him pressuring me, and I knew he didn't see that what he was doing was pressure, so I broke up with him. Love is not a fairy tale cure-all. It does not overcome all obstacles, and it is not always pure and good. Story 100. I broke up with a girl I genuinely loved in high school when I realized she had too much potential to get caught up in my foolish behavior. It was a rare moment of me not being selfish back then, and I am grateful for it. Story 101. I had issues, insecurities, and unresolved trauma, which led to avoidant attachment. He loved me deeply and would have done anything for me, but it was hurting him. I was never abusive, but I was selfish when I needed space. I was emotionally unavailable, had commitment issues, and found physical intimacy difficult, which he desperately wanted. I always said I wanted to change, but I was hesitant because that dark place felt so familiar and comfortable. I finally decided to let him go because I didn't like how I was treating him. For now, I'm staying single and in therapy. I miss him a lot. Story 102. I was married to the woman I believed would be my ride or die, but being married wasn't sustainable. She divorced me and moved on. To this day, I dream of her almost every night. The dreams feel more like nightmares because they have a life of their own. When I wake up, I am filled with loss, pain, and regret. Then, I remember why our marriage didn't work and how great my life has been despite her absence. I have come to realize that living in love with someone who doesn't love you back only prevents you from moving on and fully giving and receiving love. My second marriage of 20 years, which produced 2 children, fell apart because my ex-wife felt I was never truly in love with her, and that my first wife was an ever-present shadow looming over our marriage, even though she lives in a different country and I have not seen or heard from her in 30 years. I still love my ex-wife, but I had to let her go because I couldn't give her all of myself. Does this mean I am still in love with my first wife? No. I realized that we were young and passionately in love, but love is not enough. Life is a challenge. It's your choice how to face it. Story 103. They were addicted to cheating on me. They lied to me so much that I was starting to realize I didn't really know who they were. They stole money from me. Story 104. Yes, several times, and it is brutal and really difficult to do. With my first boyfriend, he was a nice guy and a decent human being, but we were not aligned in what we wanted out of life. I wanted to go to college and have a career. He felt intimidated by that. He felt uncomfortable around my professional colleagues because he only graduated high school and had a blue-collar job. I loved him just the same, but it was his own insecurity. Even though we both worked and contributed to the household, he wanted me to take more of a traditional homemaker role. For example, he wanted me to do all the cooking and cleaning, even though I brought an equal income and worked just like he did. He also wanted kids right away, while I wanted to finish school first and start my career. Ultimately, that led to a lot of fights, and love wasn't going to make things right. I had to break up with him. My second boyfriend cheated on me. I loved him, so I stayed and tried to make it work. In hindsight, that was a foolish thing to do. I could never trust him again. I was always paranoid that he would cheat again. It made me emotionally unstable. We would be cuddling on the couch watching television, and then something would trigger me, and I would think about him and his cheating partner doing the same thing we were, and suddenly I would be angry, sad, or both. The relationship was never the same after he cheated, and I left about 4 months later. Of course, it hurt and broke my heart, but I never regretted it. When I left these relationships, I still loved them. It was really difficult, and I thought I would love them forever and would never get over them. Oddly enough, I wondered how I would make it through life without them. That last thought was surreal because before I met them, I was making it through life just fine without them. Anyway, as time passed, they faded into distant memories, and I became indifferent to them. Now they are just distant memories. Story 105. I was still in love with everyone I've broken up with, just tired of not being a priority in their lives. I don't even have to be the first priority, just a priority. Story 106. She set fire to my car after I had a friendly lunch with another girl. Don't get me wrong, the experience was amazing, and she could be the sweetest person ever, but I am not that naive. I do miss her though, and my new partner feels like more of a temporary solution. Story 107. Yes, sometimes you have to be strong enough to realize that you are not growing anymore in the relationship. The other person may have become too complacent about your love and no longer feels the need to compromise. I ended a 9-year relationship because of this. It was very difficult, but it was what we both needed to become the best versions of ourselves for someone else. Story 108. Because they decided to try crack, and oh boy did they enjoy that too much. Years ago, I worked for an exceptional bike builder, and then he got into that substance. It turned him from a skilled fabricator to a useless individual in a few months. So when my boyfriend started down that path, I told him to choose one, Me or the substance? Well, the substance won. He went from a nice apartment downtown to the streets in a few months. Good riddance. This was 20 years ago. I see him pop up on social media every few years talking about how this time he's going to get his life on track. Then radio silence for a few years. Story 109. Unfortunately, love does not always equate to trust and compatibility, which are equally important. Story 110. Love does not equal peace and harmony. You must be aligned with your long-term partner on many aspects, or it leads to constant conflict. Love can only help to a certain degree. Story 111. My husband and I divorced and remained amicable, great friends throughout the process, and we still loved each other. I compromised a lot of myself in our relationship and realized that my partner would never meet me halfway regarding the lifestyle I desired. We lived in the suburbs close to his business, an hour from my work, friends, and interests, and he was not interested in doing anything with me or relocating. I spent a lot of time alone, isolated with his demanding work and hobby schedules. Overall, it was understandable. No one was wrong, but we were fundamentally incompatible regarding the lives we wanted. I decided I was no longer willing to find ways to compromise. Story 112. I was still deeply in love with my ex-husband when I filed for divorce. A trip to the emergency room one night, along with several stitches and bruises, made me realize that love does not fix everything or everyone, no matter how hard you want it to. Story 113. Yes, I wasn't living my best life at the time and believed they would be better off without me. Looking back, it was truly unwise. Story 114. He was unfaithful. Part of me still loves him even after 7 years. I would never enter a relationship with him again, but we have interacted a few times since we broke up. I still enjoy his company in the moment. It's just hours or days later that I remember it won't work because he betrayed his best friend. Story 115. I felt that he was a better person than I was at the time and recognized that I had room for growth. I could grow with him, but it would hurt him, so I chose to distance myself. In hindsight, it was a foolish decision, and I miss him. This is another example of how naive I was. Story 116. She didn't love me anymore, so after trying to talk it out, I realized that she wasn't going to be happy with me. I did the mature thing by letting her go, even though I still loved her. I don't want to force someone to stay with me just for my happiness. I would rather be in a loving relationship than in a one-sided one. Story 117. My ex-husband hoarded me right out of the house. There was too much clutter to clean and too much to manage pest control. I was raised in a middle-class environment, and I have reached a point where 25 years of my life do not outweigh the misery of living in that situation. I still care about him, and I am still in contact with him, but I will never go into that house again. Story 118. My girlfriend broke up with me several times over the years due to her extremely homophobic parents and her fear that they would kick her out. She still loved me, and we are happily living together now. Story 119. No, but I know people who have experienced this. You can love someone but recognize they aren't the right fit for you. They might be a great person, but for various reasons, different life plans, a history of conflicts you can't overcome, differing lifestyle choices, and more, you may need to break up with someone while still loving them. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.